Hey guys, this is Jonathan Lampel with Blender HD, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to fracture concrete. So here's just a little OpenGL preview for you. You can see that all I've done is taken a wall, fractured it, and thrown some balls at it. And yeah, so it's pretty simple, but it covers all the basics of how to get stuff looking like concrete. And so let's just get started. I'm going to open up a new file, and I'm going to load factory settings just so all of my settings don't get mixed up, so you don't get confused. And let's just get started. So to make the wall, just like in previous videos with glass and all that other stuff, I'm just going to take this, scale it on the x-axis, nope, the y-axis, and then scale it in on the x-axis. I guess loading default settings. I don't have screencast keys. Okay. Just 1 second here. There we go. Now you should be able to see what I'm typing down here in case you forget any of the shortcuts. Okay. So here I have a basic wall. Maybe I want it a little bit taller. Scale it up on the Z. Okay. So that should be good enough. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a sphere, just like before. This is really similar to glass in a lot of ways, so I won't be going over all the details because we've definitely covered them in both the wood and the glass shattering. So if you ever kind of get lost, just go back and watch those, and it'll have more of the basics. This is just showing you how to change or take that technique and change it into concrete. So I'm going to take that, parent it to the wall there, select the wall, go down to self-fracture. I guess I don't have any of these enabled since I reset to the default, so just go into your user preferences, add-ons, and self-fracture there. And then I should also have the constraints, bullet viewport constraints tool. So make sure you have that. And that should be all that we need. So now I'm going to, with the wall selected, hit self-fracture, child vertices, and this time I'm going to go about 500. And I'm going to up the noise for this one, because remember, the noise applies the Voronoi pattern, and with concrete you do want that sort of, you want your chunks to look like that. So I'll set that to 0.5. Recursion I will set to 1, and I'm going to hit small and just keep it at 0.25, and I'm going to up this to 500 so we just get a few more. And since this is going to be flat shaded, I can uncheck this to remove all the doubles, and there we go. And I'll hit OK. It does take a couple minutes longer since I upped the count here, but that'll help it look a lot better. One thing I keep meaning to do but never actually remember is setting this to a group. I definitely should have done that, but I completely forgot. So it would be really handy if you want to just type in a group here, say wall, and then when you fracture it, it's going to make all of these into a wall group, which is really handy. Okay. So here on the second layer we have our wall, and this is what we're going to add the rigid body physics to. So just make sure that one of them is the active object, go down to rigid body tools and add active. You'll get this mesh, this message, but don't worry about it because it doesn't affect the simulation. And you can play it back and see that it all works great. Looks like few of those pieces don't have physics, but they're just 2 lines, so we don't really need them. So I can just select all those, make sure I don't have anything else selected, and just hit delete. Okay. So now I'm actually going to go into the next layer, and I'm going to add a plane. First I'm going to hit Shift S cursor to center my cursor, so the object is placed right in the middle. Then I'm going to hit Control A and apply the scale. After I've scaled it up, go into rigid body and add passive. So generally it works better if you have a little bit of thickness to it. So I'm going to go into edit mode and extrude it down. And then now you can see that even though they're on 2 completely different layers, when you play this back, they will interact. So this is good. But, you know, as before, we want these to kind of stay together, and that's where the constraints, the bullet constraints tools are going to come in handy. So on this layer, I'm going to select everything, make sure one of them is the active object, and just like before, go down to the bullet constraints tool and hit X constraints. So you can go in and edit these settings before you add X constraints, but I just want to leave it at default just to show you the examples of how it starts out, to give you a better understanding. Okay, so I'm going to change this to groups so I can easily select either the constraints or the rigid body world. Keep in mind that if you do select that, it'll select everything that's a rigid body, so you might want to deselect that if you just want only the wall. So this is where the wall group would have really come in handy. Okay, so having the constraints selected, if I play this back, you see that it kind of falls apart. It doesn't really stay very solid. So one thing I can do is I can hit override iterations and increase this to say 100, and then make sure I have the constraint selected and hit update selected. So when I play that back, it'll be a lot more solid, but you still have these pieces here that are just kind of falling off. So I found that sometimes it just works better if you just remove the constraints, select everything there again, and then just try it again. So let's try that. And they'll still kind of fall off, so what we can do is we can try upping the search radius. So I'm going to hit 4, and I've been told that you shouldn't set this too high. I think I did that in one of my last videos as I set this really, really high. But you shouldn't actually do that. Apparently it messes with objects that are next to it being fractured. So I would keep this low when possible. I can also up this just a little bit. And those are still kind of falling off, but since they're kind of peripheral and they're going to be passive anyway, it's okay for now. So now I'm just going to go ahead and add the ball breaking through. So I can just use this, scale it down a little bit, because we need kind of a radius of chunks around it. And then I'm going to move that to the 3rd layer there. So then, just like before, I'm going to animate it. So I'm going to move it back along the x-axis, make it a rigid body, and on frame 10, no, sorry, on frame 1, I want to insert a location keyframe, and on frame 10, I want to insert a location keyframe right there, and on frame 9, it is going to be animated, so just hit I while hovering over that, and then on frame 10, it is not going to be animated. Okay, so if we look at both these layers at the same time, we can see them kind of interacting. And since this has, really little mass, it doesn't affect the wall any, so I can just up that to say 15. And there we go, it does interact. It does look like it's a little bit too rubbery. If it does look rubbery, you can up the iterations. I think right now it's at kind of its max. Well, it's not at its max, but you don't want to set it too high. So if setting it to 200 doesn't really change anything, which in this case, it does look a little bit better, so I'm going to keep it at 200, but keep it as low as possible if you can. That way it'll speed up the simulation. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rigid body constraints, and I'm going to enable breakable, and I want this first ball, I kind of want it to only break off a little bit of chunks. I don't want it to, completely demolish it. I just want it to kind of chip away. So I'll try 10, see how that works. Update selected. And I can hide the constraints there so I can see a little bit better. And maybe I want to take this down to about 6. So let's try that. Okay, I think 5 will be a good one. Just play around with it, see whatever you like best. And there we go. That looks good. So you can see it's just kind of breaking it. It's not, destroying it, but it's got a little bit of, push to it. And I can always change the mass of the ball. So I think that looks good. On the second layer, where there's only the wall, I'm going to take these bottom, the sides, the top, and the other side, and I'm going to make these passive. And make sure you have a little bit of these kind of like inner ones selected, so you get the jagged outline. You can play around with it to get whatever exact result you want. But that looks good, so I'm just make sure one of them is the active object. Change this to passive, and copy from active. That way, when we play this back, you can see it only breaks through right there and nowhere else. And it breaks through a little bit too much, so I will actually go ahead and up this to 7. There is a lot of kind of tweaking involved in this, but that's okay. One thing that I found is that sometimes when you're going through this, and you can see that it kind of bounces a little bit. It has a little bit of an impact bounce, and with concrete you don't want that, because concrete's not flexible at all. With wood you might definitely want that, but with concrete you don't. So one thing that you can do is you can actually lower the mass of this. Say if I set this to 3 and played this back and played it back, you can see it doesn't have that. And then, but we want it to shatter. So then I guess we can just lower this again. Say do 5 and see how that goes. Maybe a little bit lower. Like I said, there's a lot of tweaking because, there's lots of settings and I didn't update selected, so that's probably why it wasn't changing. Okay, that looks good. Then you can just select the rigid body world. I definitely forgot to make them passive, or enable deactivation. So I can hide the constraints, select everything on this layer, and enable deactivation, start deactivated, copy from active, and then I'm just going to have to go ahead and redo that, making them passive. Okay, so let's try that. I'll try upping this to 5. And that looks good. I think that's good enough. One thing that you can do if you get these kind of jittery pieces, you see like that, it's kind of wiggling around too much, what you can do is go to the rigid body world settings and up the steps per second. So here I'm going to update this to say 120, and if you play this back, you'll get a much nicer result. Okay, so that's kind of the first ball. That just kind of cracks it a little bit, and we have the majority of it done already. There we go. That looks perfect. Exactly what I wanted. All right, so now that I finally have the result that I want, I can go ahead and take this ball and I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm just going to press Shift D, and if you notice that, since I animated it, they're going to be animated at the same time, and I want to change that. So all I have to do is go into the animation layout, make sure I have the, whichever one I want selected, and change this to only include the selected channels. So it only includes keyframes from the object that's selected. So then I'm going to select one of the balls, hit period on my numpad to just bring this option up, and I can grab all these keyframes here and just kind of hit G and slide them over a bit. So when I play this back, one of them's going to shoot, and the other one's going to wait a bit and then hit. So this will be the second ball, and I want it to be a bit heavier, kind of crash through. So then down here, I'm just going to change the mass to 25. And there you go. So if we go back to the default layout, hide the constraints, you can see better what's going on. You've got the first ball kind of making a little crack, that one's making a bigger crack, and then say I want a third one to just, completely demolish, make that big hole. I can choose the second one, the one that I just changed the animation for, duplicate that, and in the animation, just make sure I have that one selected, grab those, move them over a bit. And I've got 1, 2, and 3. And that's pretty good, but I want to up the mass a little bit more on that one. So I'm going to change that one all the way to 50, so it really just shoots right through. Alright, so I think that looks pretty good. Maybe watch it one more time just to make sure we don't have any, weird pieces going anywhere or anything. But yeah, I think that looks great. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. It's really basic, not too much to go through, but I just wanted to make sure you understand how to use the constraints and the cell fracture to make it look more like concrete, and how to make it stay together for multiple fractures. And once we get through all the basics, I've got one more for bricks coming up, and that's a little bit more complicated, but still really easy. And then after we do that, we'll have fun with a actual project to take this into, see how to actually implement it in your workflow, and make an actual project out of it instead of these little wall tests or whatever that you see all the time on YouTube. So thank you for watching, and if you'd like the tutorial, then don't be afraid to like, and if you want more tutorials, then be sure to subscribe, and thank you for watching. See you next time.